Hi, MY.
Hello.
So we're back. We're back and we're continuing this series of videos in which we're talking about your path of integration, and specifically with Ifa. And now we're in this particular moment where you, the nature of your choice of dealing with this, path of Ifa is creating challenges within yourself and your ideals about commitment, responsibility, and faith, trust. And it's also creating challenges with your family, and specifically your wife at the moment, in which you said that she was, and you used a term used by the practitioners of Ifa, mounted, which in this particular case, it's very much like someone who has the capacity to channel different energies. And we use the term mediumship. And, sometimes these energies could enter your body against your wishes, and sometimes they do with permission. So, here's where we need to distinguish the differences between, evolved entities or spirits versus none. Instead of saying good and bad, we kind of, get away from that judgment. And
Right.
it's that, some life forces or spirits or ghosts, whatever you want to call them, they don't understand and respect, the respect they need to have in order to enter a physical body or somebody else's vehicle. It's the same thing as a thief that comes and enters into your home without your permission. The same thing happens with these energies where they, sort of see a situation that is taking place and they just take advantage of the situation and invite themselves without being, asked to participate. And this is kind of what was happening to your spouse.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, just to, yes, and that's the terminology I used only because that's my understanding from an Ifa perspective. But when you're looking at it from the paradigm of channeling and mediumship, most of the channelings that I've encountered or seen are people that are opening themselves up for those energies to come down, right? And in the example that I used in the previous part, it was not one of those situations. It was a situation where it was unwanted. And in retrospect, later on, we found out that it was definitely a lower vibe energy that was not invited for sure. So and so I just don't, it's important that we differentiate that. I just don't, the terminology, the mounted, it can be a scary term, but think of it in terms of channeling, right? Whether it's invited or not. And if you're talking about channeling, we're also talking about setting up boundaries, right? So at that time when it happened, it was not something that I worried about because I'd had protection. Medicines and stuff that were placed for my protection, but once again, it was lack of knowledge and ignorance of the potential of the impact that it would have had in this particular case on my wife at the time. So yeah, and it happened more than once, several times. It just and after the first time that it happened, the subsequent instances of it happening, same energy that would come down, and it wasn't anything that required a serious opening of the energy. It was just even, just mild energy openings, because we didn't have the knowledge and or executed the boundaries within our home. That entity would come down and mount her. And so I remember one time that we were just doing something at the second Baba's house, and he was actually trying to put some medicine on her, and the entity came down right in the middle of her having this medicine put on her and mounted her. And I had to hold her down just so that until the episode had resolved, and I got bit. I mean, she bit me right while she was being mounted. I mean, I have the shirt that has the hole still, the teeth mark still on it. So anyway, just to kind of clarify that, and as a happy ending, certain things have been done since, and you know, now she's fine. But back then, I mean, there was a lot of ignorance.
It also, again, it's one of the things that happens when it's kind of like when we get our feet wet in situations where, you know, if we're hungry for self-empowerment, it comes back to that, right? So there are different types of self-empowerment that sometimes we're searching for, that when we're looking for, we don't really understand where we're at. So there are healthy ways of finding self-empowerment, and there's unhealthy ways. But how do we know? How do we know exactly what we're looking for until we're doing it? Because this is something that I always talk about, where, you know, we live in a reality that is experiential. You know, we can talk about things forever, but it's not until we actually put it into practice that we don't get to learn more of what that is and how we feel about it. So, you know, we're looking for, in this, again, where I'm choosing to relate to your story, which is the story of many of us when we're in this journey of integration, and it's about self-empowerment. It's about, you know, understanding our spiritual nature and who we are, you know, as spiritual beings. So in your case, you know, or in your partner's case, she has this ability of mediumship, which is a quality that some people have that is more developed than others, because I think we can all do that. It's just a matter of how developed we are in that skill. So when you have somebody who has a vehicle that can channel energy, it's just, you know, it's not about just being able to channel one particular energy. It's an open vehicle that if that vehicle has not been taught, or that person has not been taught how to protect herself from certain energies, especially those that are kind of waiting for the opportunity to just jump in, because we live in a universe that is all inclusive. There's all kinds of energies, all kinds of vibrations.
Right.
And here we are working with energy and manipulating energy all the time, that it creates a particular frequency. And when we are going through a difficult time, in that moment, we're not thinking about our frequency. We're just feeling the discomfort of what we're feeling in that moment. And we're not in that moment remembering that we're opening doorways to vibrations that are similar in nature to what we're feeling in that moment, right? So, you know, we tend to become more physical focused than energetically, and we can be a doorway for many type of energies. In this particular case, it's interesting that you have a partner that is able to channel any type of energy in, you know, in a given moment, and she's not being given the formula to how to protect herself. But here you are dealing with a situation with somebody who you think is part of your path of self-empowerment, and here's your spouse taking upon energies that you do not see but are there present.
Yep.
In that particular ceremony, that are messy energies that we don't want to deal with, and she's just letting it on. And I mean, this is what a perfect opportunity to demonstrate what is happening to us, you know, from a vibrational perspective that we don't see, but we feel it.
Yeah.
But here's somebody who can actually make it happen, and that was your spouse. Wow. So not only does it happen one time, but it happens several times. And by now, what are you thinking? What are you feeling?
Well, I mean, the episodes happen within a short period of time, and of course, at that time, I was going to the second Baba. Hey, like, what do we, I was given some tools to help resolve the episodes that happened. And of course, I'm a little concerned because it just seemed like at some point, conversations with this Baba, I could clearly see that he was not very clear as to what to do. I had no idea what to do. So that's when it really kind of came to bear. It's like, okay, the whole idea of what we were talking about is that they come down with and you have this pretense that they're in. And as an example is that, hey, didn't know what was going on, nor had you had the training, right?
So let me ask you, the first time that she was taken by this energy, what were you guys doing? Were you guys doing a ceremony in particular of sacrifice?
I was doing the sacrifice outside my backyard. And I mean, I literally walked through the back patio, walked in, and she just came out and just said, "Hey, how'd it go?" And boom, that's when it hit.
That was the first time.
First time. Yeah.
So there
And
is
then,
something I want to clarify here because I think I made this video in Spanish. I think I did in Spanish and I didn't do it in English, but I gave reasons as to why I was not initiated in Ifa. You know, it was a path that was presented to me more than once. In this video in Spanish, I talked about what I had learned through the sacrifices of blood. And I think it pertains to what we're talking about. And one of the reasons that I've learned to understand with the sacrifices is, being a high priestess, well, I had several experiences where I was a high priest and priestess in different timelines. But one of the things that I came to understand is that once the nature of the sacrifices became blood oriented,
mhm.
there was a penetration of dark forces, demonic forces that started to contaminate the nature of the sacrifices. So in this particular incarnation, I was to do the work without being initiated, nor without using sacrifices.
Mhm.
So I like to bring that into context that it's not that sacrifices were not done in the past and were part of a ceremony. It was when the sacrifices became blown out of proportion and now blood was spilled to use it for any type of situation or any means so that the high priest or priestess would get the desired outcome. So yeah, it's interesting that that applies in this particular situation where you're doing a ceremony which you feel that it's something that is needed to be done in your path with Ifa, and all of a sudden your partner takes in this energy who was watching, observing, and
Right.
decides to take advantage of the situation.
And I would add in on top of that too is that the intent of the person making the offering of the sacrifice also comes into play, right?
Right.
I mean, if you're an example is if you're making a sacrifice to alleviate a problem, it's much different than if you're making a sacrifice to cause harm to somebody else. And my assessment from that is that if your intention is that low vibe, you're inviting other low vibe energies to come in. And in this particular case, that's what happened. It wasn't, so yeah.
I've come to an understanding that, at least in my path, in my personal evolution, is no blood sacrifices at all.
Yeah.
I finally reached that level of understanding that to become in one with God or have a closer relationship to God, blood is not needed
Yeah.
as a form of sacrifice. So I personally, I mean, whoever wants to do it, it's okay. Is their decision. But for me, I don't need to have any type of sacrifices in order to feel that connection to God. And
Oh, yeah.
again, my experiences in making that connection had nothing to do with blood. So if that's something that a person feels that is needed, and then all my respect, that's your choice. But do you really need to do it in that way? No. That's something that's been corrupted in many different ways, and I respect that corruption for whoever wants to nurture that. But that's just from my perspective. I'm not here again judging your choices, because once upon a time I felt that that was part of, the connection, you know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
I've been there and done that. I just don't feel that way right now.
And
So
I agree with you. So I mean, part of my journey too has been there, done that. And where I stand now, like I said before, it's not something I would do anymore, because my experience energetically with God and the divine has all been through just intention and no sacrifices of anything of going on. If anything else, there are still offerings, but
right,
they're
but it doesn't have to be like that. And I
yeah.
think it's part of the growing pains, the experiences of growing pain and maturing, that we start realizing, in our journey, that, a lot of the methods that we've used over time here on earth to create a closer relationship to God are contaminated and corrupted. And this is, part of what we need to integrate today, where, we have the opportunity to have an experience, and through that experience understand the result and the effect of our choice from a perspective where it's deeper. So it's not just on the surface how we used to do it before. Now it can bring us into a deeper level of awareness where we're recognizing more than what we used to, and realize that, oh no, we don't have to make that choice. We don't have to do it in that way. And that's the beauty of this path of integration, where it's not just about knowing something at the surface, the surface level. It's, knowing it multi-dimensionally.
Right.
That brings us that understanding. So coming back to your partner, so you were able to find the right medicine, which is something that was a process for you and her, I would imagine, trying to figure it out and how to get her to stop to be at the mercy of these energies momentarily, which I can relate to those stories. Um, yeah, I know what that feels like. So then you get to that point where you decide, you know what, this is not working.
Yes.
So what do you do?
So what happened, or what did I do when it's not working?
So she stops, so basically you let go of the first Baba. That was your loyalty. The second time around was your trust. And now you have your spouse, where you're like, okay, there's more to this, about maybe getting out.
So I mean, part of the the journey. I mean, there are more moving pieces associated to the beginning of my spiritual awakening, right? So I got out, disconnected from the second Baba, but then other challenges come up, and that's with my relationship with my wife and my family and her mother-in-law. And we had already at that point started making changes, and there were some challenges that happened with that, and she ended up moving out, the mother-in-law. And then stuff started to surface about my relationship with my wife. So, and ultimately tried to navigate through that, and without making a story too long, we started getting some spiritual help through that regard. And I started looking for other methodologies because, and around that time, I was also, when I started seeing that there was other energies that was having an impact besides Ifa, because at that time, when things are starting to get challenged, of course, I was defaulting to, hey, what can I do Ifa-wise to help me resolve this, right? And the answer didn't come from Ifa. And at one point, at that time, I had a business, and I was at that point, with all the turbulence that was going on in my personal life, there was a moment where I had a revelation. I was in my business shop, I was struggling with it, and I just finally said prayer to not Ifa, in the sense of, in that regard, I just kind of said a prayer to Spirit, a prayer to God, in a sense, and I just really asked for some help. And literally, without getting too much detail, the following day there was some solutions that came from my prayer, just financially. I mean, literally the following day, in the form of a phone call that was initiated by the bank, and that helped me in my business. And that's when I started realizing, wait a minute, I didn't have to make a sacrifice of an animal for that answer to come, right? Yeah. And so fast forward, so I had these moments, right? Fast forward to the moment at a seer. I was seeing a seer at the time, and trying to get help with figuring out. And that's when it started. I went to a metaphysical store and was exploring other avenues of spiritual connection at that point. Because at that point, I realized, Ifa's not working for me anymore. And one of the persons that was there just pretty much it was really, had a conversation with my journey, and, she didn't sell me anything. She just said, for some reason, I'm feeling a calling for me to give you a book that I have. And it was a book on communication with spirit, beyond the level of just Ifa. It was just from a metaphysical perspective. And that's when and I walked through the door, and that's when I started looking at, other practices, Celtic witches, and I kind of, to make my journey, it sort of started opening up all these avenues of other knowledges about other ways in which other systems were practicing. And that's when I started kind of seeing that there's a synonymous aspect of the concept of God and how we connect with it. And the big moment I had was around that time, was when I was in the moment with a seer, and we just started meditating. Actually, it was my first session with her. And in the middle of the session, I mean, literally, I had, I'm starting to feel it now, just talking about it. It felt like energetically someone had cut the top of my skull off of my head, and all this energy just came down, and it felt like there was this heat that was around, and my brain was just like open. And the seer, when she was working with me, every time she works with me, she closes her eyes, and so she said, okay, she was seeing it. She was seeing the energy. She said, okay, I'm seeing this energy coming down. Just stay with it. Stay with the meditation. And so fast forward after the experience, she said, well, this is what I saw. Basically, you had what's called a Kundalini Awakening, but it starts with your crown instead of from the root, right? From the root chakra. And come to find out, the research later on what that was, I had no idea what Kunda what. I had no idea what that was.
Right.
So that's when I started opening more doors about Kundalini Awakenings and stuff. And so depending on your previous incarnations, Kundalini Awakenings from the book that I'd read and said that it doesn't necessarily have to start at the root. It can start at other points in the chakra depending on your previous incarnations as to whether you had evolved in that particular chakra opening. So for me, it was the crown, which was my experience. So that began my journey with all the knowledge base, the studying, began my journey with meditation. It began, that whole process of me just understanding that there's another way to integrate with God, right? Having to learn all these lessons, and I started experiencing my heart chakra and my third eye opening. I had no idea what it was when it was happening, but the third eye started actually opening before my heart chakra. I was it was the springtime, it was starting to come. So I was starting to wear sunglasses during my times that I was outside and working out and things of that nature. And I started feeling this pressure like right here. And I thought, oh, maybe it's because I hadn't worn sunglasses for a while. And I kept feeling that every time I would go out for a run. So of course I did research on it and sure enough find out that that's the beginning of your third eye opening, right? And of course nowadays, I mean, and there's been a journey with how that's progressed in frequency and things of that nature. And around that time, the meditation was occurring. I had another moment where at this point I can equate to my heart chakra opening. And that was on a run that I went on. And I felt this energy. I meditate when I work out. So I felt this energy. It was this beautiful energy. And like this love energy just came down. And I was crying nonstop I could not stop crying. There's this feeling. I can almost feel like I want to start crying now thinking about it. But and then time kind of slowed down a little bit. I came back and I was trying to I would try to start running and then, but I kept crying and crying. And so I finally said, okay, I'm going to come back. And come to find out, I was gone for like 45 minutes, an hour. My family was like, hey, what happened? Oh, wait, I was gone for that long. So there was definitely some stuff that was going on. And then that's when talked to the seer about it. And yeah, it kind of turned out that from what I could ascertain, it was my heart chakra opening. And so that happened well over a year ago. But
by then you had already like walked away from Ifa.
Right. I mean, that I want to say that I walked away from Ifa back in. So today it's 2023. So I want to say I walked away from Ifa January of 2021, 22. But the heart chakra happened after I left Ifa. And, I mean, there's some things that I did have to leave. And I decided at that point, with all these experiences with my crown chakra and everything that was going on, I decided that this is my next part of my journey and I don't need this anymore. So the Ifa.
This is really important. And why? Because a lot of times there's this understanding that once you go into a practice like this and you get initiated into a practice like this, that there's no way in the world that you can walk away from it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all of these belief systems again that we use and put in place and nurture that we think that they have to be or black or white and there's no other way around it, when in truth is not necessarily true. So you had an awakening. You had like an alignment of energy centers in your body that gave you all of this series of sensation that made you very aware of what was happening to you after you left Ifa. Or the process.
Yeah. So some of it happened before I left Ifa.
Okay, so it was a process
Mm-hmm.
that you were moving away from a practice or a system of beliefs into discovering another way in which didn't require you to have sacrifices, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So for those people who may find themselves in similar situation, I think this is an important part of the equation, right? Or this journey of integration, because I've known a few people where they feel like there's no way, and there's a lot of taboos and there's a lot of misinformation that people have sometimes, and it's based on fear. There's a lot
Yes.
of fear about retribution of what these people can do, because it happened to me, when I walked away from this path and I made that choice. I remember the Baba telling me, you will never amount to anything because I'm your God and I'm going to make sure that you pay for it. So, there's a lot of fear-based beliefs and understanding, and there's also a lot of manipulation and a lot of what is that word that we use other than manipulation? Where somebody's trying to self-impose their ideas onto you. So I think this is going to be really helpful, because here you're having an experience or different experiences or sensations of knowing that there's something more, and is not coming from a ceremony. Because let me ask you this: while you were having these ceremonies of sacrifices, did you ever encounter or felt an altered state of awareness of unconditional love or oneness with God in those ceremonies?
Not in the way that I experience God now. No. I
Okay.
didn't. I never
Saying
experienced
it's
love.
impossible. I'm just saying that in your particular case, because some people may find that light with Ifa
Right. Right.
and may have a very different journey than you have with Ifa. So we we have to take that into account, because everybody is a very unique being and has a very unique way of finding God. So I don't want to make, statements here based on my own judgments
Yeah.
and
No. I mean, we're all in our own journey, and to answer your question, it's not in the way that I experience God now. And not only that, I mean, the how it's impacted me is, remember, when you're operating at a certain vibrational level, you're making decisions and or choosing to surround yourself with certain vibrations. There's an ultimate impact on who you are as a person. And when I take a picture of who I was before my awakening and who I am today, um, it I'm a different person. I'm a different person. How I connect with people nowadays and talk to people and things of that nature is is night and day different to how I was before this journey of healing happened for me. So when I experience God now, it's through love and joy and bliss. And I mean, we say all those choice words, but ultimately it's about the frequency, right? And when you accept that and you learn all the other things that we've learned about personal sovereignty and its challenges, and recognizing that, and it has a, an, a 100-degree impact on how you see your life and your loved ones and other people that you've never met. Um, and the empathic way in which it impacts you and how you feel and see energy, and then how can I question that personal experience for myself? You know, so and that I think at some point when I started experiencing that is when I just finally said, you know what, yeah, it's my time to. I don't need to practice Ifa anymore, because there's another door opening here for me, and I'm walking through that. You know.
I think it's important to also tell that it doesn't mean that you don't have your bad days. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
like once we go through this process of reconnecting with, ourselves or deeper aspects of ourselves, that, we found the cure and now we're perfect and we're this angel and we're not bound to have moments of, disagreement, tension, stress, and all of this. I mean,
Oh,
we
yeah.
still continue, but there is a level of awareness of your own capacities or maybe power or divine nature that is present.
Yes.
That is telling you, hey, everything is going to be okay. And no, you don't have to run in the opposite direction to give your power away, which, I mean, it's a process, because, it's a process where we kind of little by little regain a level of selflessness. No, that's not the word that I'm trying to say, of knowing the self,
Right.
knowing ourself from a different perspective, where we say, wait a minute, I don't have to idealize anybody, or I don't have to do this ceremony in order to get, you know what I mean? It's that self-empowerment doesn't translate in the same manner. It's more about knowledge and wisdom, how to apply that wisdom.
Yeah, and the ability to discern what's going on with you at the moment, right? Whereas before, when I was doing a ritual, I didn't realize or had the capability to discern the energies that was associated to what I was doing. But now, having experienced all these different things, I can discern and make the decision, right? Which is why we still have to have these challenges, because we still exist in this life.
Right.
We still have to deal with low vibe energy.
That's right.
And people
inclusive.
Right. And we still have moments where we get up out of bed and we go, oh man, I'm feeling really heavy and all this stuff. So, but the difference is that instead of getting wound up in that emotion and or energy, you can step back and go, oh wait, here's a heavy, and I'm going to and I can recognize that. And so I'm going to make a different decision to change that.
Right.
And that's what you're talking about, is that, yeah, we constantly have all these challenges. It doesn't
end there. No, and it's also to know that some of these energies, right, these low vibe energies, they're tricksters. They're basically, they have learned a few tricks that they can use because they know that we don't know any better, and they just kind of playing this game like, anybody would, trying to talk you into something that is not true. So,
right.
It's creating a momentarily illusion of something that you may not be seeing, but now they're helping you to see, but there is a prize. So yeah, it's very interesting how that happens, where, you come to a point in your life where you say, I don't need more tricksters or more evidence or proof of how to be a magician, because I am a magician. It's just that I don't have to choose those tricks in order to prove that I am a magician.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
It's a constant battle. So
yeah, but it's everybody will all have to go through this. Yep. No one is exempt of this trials. For some people, maybe, I don't know if there's, for some people it's easier. I don't know. I think, it depends.
Yeah, we still have to have we have a paradigm of experience, right, within ourselves, and it's easy to compare. Like, we could sit in a table of 10 people who've had an awakening, and we talk about the different experiences, but it's still heavy. The universe's way of making the wall and making us really analyze ourselves at that crossroads.
Right.
It's still an experience we have to work through. Whether for me it was this or that with my peers and my ex-wife, or whatever, or whether it was your pet dying, right? It's still, those are all still experiences that the universe is calling us to really at some point to evaluate.
Right. So I want to bring back to, okay, so this idea that, because sometimes we fear that if we walk away from something, which I think we all come to terms to, and I think is that moment where, in this particular case with Christ, he had to go through the desert and, go through the last test, which, this is, I don't know if this is a perfect example, but my point is where you have to face your own demons, and the demons are based on your own fears, and is to realize that to walk that path of the higher road, or the path of the hero, or to, be in direct connection to God, you have to let go of all the intermediate, the middle people, or the middle agents, or the third party connection, because you no longer need it. And in this particular case for you was to break away from Ifa, because now you know that you don't need that route to get to where you need to get, because now you can do it directly with, what your choices you're making. So how did you broke away? What did you do? Because it's interesting, you're being initiated in a practice where there are sacrifices and blood, and it binds you to some degree to these energies at every level. So what did you do to break apart from that aspect while you were feeling that something was flourishing within you?
Right. I followed my intuition. At this point I was starting to trust in myself more. And I didn't want to place my trust in talking to another Babalao about it. But what my intuition told me was that doing it out of respect, you can go to nature and ask, and out of respect to Ifa, because all the tools and implements and all the beads and all the stuff that has all this energy to it. I paid homage to it, and I just said, okay, well, I'm gonna just, hey, I asked Earth to just please accept this, and Ifa, thank you for the journey. And I just buried all my stuff in nature. I followed my gut, went to the woods, and just kind of was where nature was gonna take it. I followed it, and went there. And funny story, we're talking about energy and synchronicities, is that on a side note, my oldest son later on decided to do the same thing. And and he ended up, and he didn't go with me when I buried my Ifa influence. And then he went with my ex to kind of do the same thing, and he went off and did the thing. He went and buried his stuff as well. And when my ex came back and said where he buried it, she realized, wait a minute, I think this is where Dad buried his stuff. And they were burying
city.
Yeah, so because when I initially went, I went with my ex-wife at that time, and my younger son, and they went off on a trail. So they kind of had an idea of where I went on.
I couldn't hear you.
What was that?
Okay, say it again. No, it's just that for a moment I lost audio. Go ahead.
So when I went at the time with my wife and my son at the time, they left me alone to go, but they had an idea of where I went. They didn't know exactly, right? So,
right.
So now fast forward to my oldest son doing it. They did the same with him, and then when they came back, said, "Wait, what do you?" And so they thought, "Wait, this is kind of where Dad was when he buried his stuff." And so when they went to do it, they found stuff that I had buried.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah. And so my wife was like, "Wait, oh my goodness, these are, the beads from this and that." Yeah, it was very
it's interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting. That nature called my son to that spot too. Yeah.
But this is another example of trusting yourself, right? Like when because this is something also that I talk, especially to the Spanish audience, because I don't do as many videos in English anymore as I used to, but it's how, as you begin in this journey, which it didn't started out by you having the awakening, started way before. When, you now begin to sort of go on your own, it's kind of like when you mature, you get to a certain point in your life where you're trying to break away from the ties of your parents and you want to do your own thing, right? You want to become more independent. You start out by following your own instincts, your own intuition, and little by little, you start trusting yourself more and more. And it's funny how it's kind of like a journey where you begin to see how your instincts, right, which represent this operating system that it's built in within you and is connected directly to God or to your divine nature, begins to work. And you start having all these experiences where then get synchronized with other people that it's demonstrating that, hey, look at that, look at what you're doing, the impact and the effect that it's having at other levels. The
Oh
same
yeah.
way that, when you were doing that ceremony with your partner, that, you were doing something which you thought it was good, and all of a sudden she starts channeling this energy was not good.
Right.
So, here you have a reflection of what's happening energetically that is the same level of vibration, but you thought in that moment was good, versus to doing something that feels right.
Right.
And other people are responding, and that it's just amazing, right? How what we are is
No,
energies.
no, definitely. And yeah, I mean, the overall experience has been, and we talk about in this awakening process, all the layers that we can develop within ourselves, and all the things that I can feel and see now. Um, it, it's a special connection, and it's not coming from wanting power. It's a revelation. In once you establish this connection, um, that okay, this is part of my existence, and for me, it's been just a beautiful journey. And in terms of my own personal experience, I didn't have any of that when I was practicing Ifa, you know. Um, and not to say that you can't, but for me, it was um, that journey allowed me to open up myself to where I'm at now, and that's the thing. It's just been it's still a beautiful journey. Yeah, it's
Well, and
progressive.
what is power without freedom? Like, at what cost do we want power? Because a lot of times the type of power that we've been taught to attain, it's basically binding your soul and your freedom
Right.
to vibrations that are not necessarily there to, help you or to make you feel at ease or at peace or in love with yourself. So,
Right.
but it's the lessons that we have to learn in order to really have a deeper understanding of what love, joy, freedom, and peace of mind is about.
Yes. Yes. I feel much more freer, actually, and energetically, I feel 20 years younger. So
Yeah, bravo.
yeah,
That's
so I don't,
actually good. So you have no regrets.
no, absolutely not. And even the decisions that caused all this was part of my journey. So it's all with gratitude for me where I'm at now. I feel very blessed. So, um, but yeah, it's still ongoing. There's still the energy activations that are occurring. With part of the journey is navigating that continued existence, right? But then but you can feel the change and as you're discovering new things about yourself. But energy activations on my face, my body, things I see when I sometimes meet people, are things that in a form, in some ways, is a way for you to continue to heal others without actually ever having to talk to them, because you're carrying a joyful energy. And much like a rock hitting a still water lake, you have an impact on the people you meet. And that's where, for me, for me, that's where I kind of see the impacts that I have on people now. That if I can carry myself with some peace and joy, that energy will affect people that I meet, or people that I
Positive way, yeah.
yeah. So, and who knows if there's anything else besides just that for me, but I guess that would be revealed.
Well, what we can do is we can continue to have this exchange when we can talk about things. I mean, we talked about this apart from this information that you have provided about IFA, and thank you so much for doing this, because I've been wanting to do it for a while, and finally you felt like, okay, I'm ready. So I totally appreciate your, finally coming forward and doing this with me.
Okay.
And hopefully it'll be the beginning of us coming together and talking about other topics where we can pick each other's brain.
Sure.
And well, hopefully, with the purpose of helping other people. And
Yes.
ourselves too, because I think we learn a lot from each other when we're talking about these things.
Yes, absolutely. It opens up other frequencies of revelation, remember? So
That's correct.
maybe what we talk about today resonates with the people that listen.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, well, thank you so much, and
Welcome.
we will see you next time around.
In terms of Ifa, Alafia, which means good health.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, cool. Bye.